From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter and what is west of Westeros in the shadows in the east, this is Casterly Talk. I'm Ken Napzok, and this is Alden Diaz. Hey, Alden, how are you?
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and we are here to talk Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Winds of Winter, George R.R. Martin, Orcs, Rings of Power, posters, merch, so many things, Alden. Thanks for coming back to the show.
When you listed all those things, it just made me so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I mean, for a thing to end, and the books, ending TBD, and then have this much going on, it's crazy.
It's fun. It's exciting. I was just looking at a calendar to plan some Star Wars content over in Force Center with Joseph and Jennifer, and I was looking at that August 21st date. It's so exciting, but it's on the hill. It is almost like Gandalf dawn on the fifth day. It's there, but it's intimidating. It's going to be a lot of fun to break it down along with Rings of Power, but we're getting close to all of that, and you can feel it in the air, you know?
Yeah, I think if I have my math and dates correct, there's going to be a sweet spot in September where there is Lord of the Rings, House of the Dragon, and 2 Star Wars shows airing at the same time. That's going to happen at least 1 or 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, maybe within the span of a couple days, right? Fridays,
Yeah.
Saturdays, Wednesdays. Oh my gosh, it's going to be a lot. But hey, it's a great time to be a nerd, and we are here. We've had a lot of fun on the channel just talking about news lately. There's been a lot of things to talk about, which we are having fun breaking it down. Alden is just one of the best to come breaking things down on the fly and diving on into it. I do want to let people know the Game of Thrones rewatch. I haven't forgot about it. Don't you forget about it. I am actually, as of this morning, was watching season 4, episode 7, Mockingbird, getting ready to cover that as we race towards some giant episodes in season 4 of Game of Thrones, and having a lot of fun with that Mockingbird episode, which includes we've got the Melisandre in the bathtub scene, which is awkward and weird, but also contains the core of the episode, truths and lies and the power behind all that. So fascinating episode. Can't wait to break that down. And we'll get you back on, Alden. We'll have you get out your spiral notebook of theme notes.
Oh,
and talk about it.
Yeah, instead of just texting them to you in long paragraphs Wednesday mornings about other things. We'll bring them onto the show. I think season 4 is possibly my favorite still. Years later, I think it's so strong. It has a lot of its taste. A lot of it is what characters you love and what aspects are your favorites. But like if your favorite characters include Ned Stark, it's one season for you, really. But really it's interesting, to look back on all that stuff now.
Yeah, and Doug, you and I, we are of the ilk that has rewatched Game of Thrones several times over, start to finish, many, many times. But having this rewatch and going through it slowly and slower than I anticipated here on the podcast, other things kind of got in front of it. But man, it's really changing my views on certain seasons that I thought I had from afar. Where I don't know, season 3 it's not my favorite as much as I thought when I first saw it. Now I'm like, ooh, that's a big thematic core of the show. And then season 4, I'm like, it's remembered for some big things, but once you take a look at it beat by beat, theme by theme, they all are pretty darn powerful.
Oh yeah, I remember completing the show for the first time, or completing what we had of it for the first time. Because when I joined in, I was able to binge 1 through 3.
Gotcha.
I was late to that party by a couple of years there, and so I remember saying, this is so good. It's one of my favorite things. I can't wait for more. But all the stuff in like those, I would say like those random cities, Karth, whatever that was, did that matter? And then upon a rewatch, and especially with the whole picture, looking back at those characters that pop in for an arc and then leave and all that stuff, and people like the was it the spice trader? What is his actual title?
I think he's a trader of spices.
Yeah, I was just a humble trader of spices. I look back at that scene and I'm like, so much is happening here. And the way that she handles Karth and before leaving, like, oh my goodness. It informs everything up until the very last episode.
It really does. Yeah. I was just this morning, about halfway through the episode, you have to break up the rewatch as I get through life. And you got the one of my most painful scenes is a Jorah fan, Dario, coming down the stairs the morning after with Danny. God bless him and God bless her, getting and doing and experiencing what she wants. So no problem there. But my man Jorah, being so just, but then also that's one of her great moments of trust in him and him as an advisor. So wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. The rewatch will continue. I just wanted to highlight that there. Thank you for all who are allowing me to take my time to get through it there as well. But we do have some news to get to. The first one, Alden, actually, it's like the week started quiet. The week started quiet. Now we're fit last week. Let's be clear. The big news you and I were talking about with the Jon Snow sequel show. That was the main reason we were talking about news last week, and we have the big follow up to that. So I don't want to bury the lead, but we're coming out of that kind of exciting, wow, but that's kind of weird. Is it even real kind of news? And then along the way, we get this cool poster I'm putting up here on the YouTube channel. But for those listening, you have Rhaenyra standing there. It is the throne. I'm looking at it now. I had to shrink it down to format it, and my eyes are failing me. But we got Syrax there, big dragon behind her, of course. And it's a House of the Dragon, so this poster just makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's very simple. It's obviously it's a digital asset dragon actress photo shoot. Like,
wait a second, are you telling me?
I'm telling you that dragons aren't real. Nor is that a giant practical like rainforest cafe creature. But it's so it's like you could say like, oh, boring, whatever. I've seen some talk of like, oh, it's just dragon head. Like, yeah, it's no Drew Struzan poster, but what's powerful here and intelligent for them to do, I think, and just good marketing, is that you're taking the melted swords iconography, a dragon, and you're putting a young woman with this signature family hair, with this right. regal dress all together, and it just immediately, I think, speaks to all levels of fan and everybody that appreciated Daenerys Targaryen. It conveys all of that, especially as we got toward the end and her babies were fully grown, and scenes like her and Jon bonding with Drogon, and Jon getting really close to the dragon heads, being able to pet them. Like, it just feels like a natural extension.
It absolutely does. And if you're looking for just basic themes behind it, of course, it's pretty simple. You got a queen to be, so to speak. This is the younger version of Rhaenyra right here. And then, the dragons behind it. And the big selling point of the show has been this whole line of, names didn't make us kings. Dragons did. I might be messing up the dreams. Dreams didn't make us kings. You got to get your catchphrases right, Alden. Dreams didn't make us kings. Dragons did. We're going to talk about merch a little bit later in the show here, but this is I love it. I love when it's just kind of all simple and direct. There's dragons are the power here, right?
It's very direct, and seeing we know what melted those swords, or if you don't know and this is your first time, you can infer based on this. So it's a little bit of following up on story threads and mythology for those that know, but it's also a really, really good introductory piece, which is a challenge of franchise media right now, right? Like, you could, we just finished Obi-Wan Kenobi, and light spoilers for that. There's a Vader confrontation, surprise. And there's been some talk, like, is this too in line with what we saw before? And I could see that with this character. Is this just another Daenerys? And it's like, well, entry points need to be universal in that way. At certain elements.
To me, this is powerful imagery of what could be and what was, and the intersection of that. And we're going to hopefully people will just give the show a chance to do what it wants to do, because George R. R. Martin has written this part of his own history and told it and done what he's wanted to do in that. And now he's a part of this story. So, but I agree with you. And I know we talk about it every week because it's the big question, because it's still a question that is raised in conversations I have with friends off air. Some people are just like, no, not again. I don't want to get burned. And other people are like, I'm willing to give it a chance. And there's people like me and you who are just never in doubt. Sure, more. We're going to talk about more today. And you just got to find that balance. And it all comes down to this poster here right now. More to come. But a big dragon and a blonde-haired queen. That's the image.
Yeah, and it also is just the erasure of any ambiguity of how much dragon are we actually going to see? Is it just called House of the Dragon because they're Targaryens and we'll only see them flying in the distance? It's like, nope, here it is, star of the show as well. So if that's what you're into, here you go.
Yep, and we got about 17 new dragon names to commit to memory. We're gonna take you through those dragons one by one here eventually on
yeah. Yeah, and none of them have cute name associations to make it easier. At least not that I am aware of. Because with Danny's dragons, it's like, oh, Rhaegal like Rhaegar. Like you were able to do that. Drogon like Drogo. Like, nope, not this time.
Yep. And still every once in a while, because I've never had to compete in Game of Thrones trivia questions. Every once in a while, I'm like, Dragon. It's Drogon. That's right. And I'm someone who soaks up this stuff weekly still. This series is full of a lot of complicated names, and that's been something that's been since season 1. Since I've had friends going, I can't remember all the names, so we now have 17 new ones to learn. There we go.
Yeah, it's no Star Trek, and I just binge Strange New Worlds. Who's the main character? Chris. Way easier.
Way easier. Dude. Speaking of way easier. It is way easier to get information directly from George R.R. Martin these days. He is on fire again on his GeorgeRRMartin.com/not-a-blog, where he can talk about the Jets and the Mets and the Giants and also a lot of other things. So he dropped some interesting stuff. Now, actually, let's drop back a little bit, Alden. Let's call an audible here. We had the Jon Snow news last week, which was this pitched, planned, in development show about Jon Snow and the story going forward after season 8. Great, cool. You and I had an hour-long conversation about it. But again, like I said, we could play that game. Hey, it's in development. It might not happen, and that's still gonna be part of the conversation today. But to me, it was almost like, is this a dream? Is this really happening? And this, after that poster, the next bit of news this week was Emilia Clarke saying, yeah, he's told me about it. I know it exists. It's happening. That's a quote from her to the BBC, and that got out online. Realizing she might have said too much, and I'm reading here from the New York Post to credit them. Realizing she might have said too much, she continued, it's been created by Kit, as far as I can understand, so he's in it from the ground up. So what you will be watching, hopefully, if it happens, is certified by Kit Harington, which I love that line that, well, I might have said too much, so let me say more.
And then, I'm in it now. You're in the great game now. Keep talking, Emilia.
You're in the great game now. The Post reached out to Harington's representative for comment. She ends this little interview by saying, being asked, of course, will Daenerys appear in the show at all? Which you and I have talked off air and on last week about how there's a way something like that could work. She says, no, I think I'm done. She replied, laughing, which, those words are wind. Words are wind. So there on that. So that started it. Then we're going to get into George R. R. Martin's blog, but actually I do want to start there, Alden, because that's how I first started to hear it. That almost even added more to the dreamlike quality of this story.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to give a shout out to whichever executives or PR people heard about this and then had to scramble, and then they realized we don't control her anymore. We don't have Emilia's not under NDA. There's nothing we can do. It's great. Daenerys is gone, guys. Sorry, she could talk. She's
an NDA cannot kill fire.
Yeah, she's not in the family anymore. So I'm sure Kit got a call. Hey, can you stop talking to the family? Thank you. But I agree. It definitely it picked up. I mean, we're here a week later, right? There's a week between last Casterly Talk and this one, and it has picked up so much steam. To have this immediately adds to the surrealness of it, because this is the co-lead of the entire thing, commenting on something that nobody thought would happen, and not just commenting saying, something typical like, I'd love to see more Kit, he's great. Nothing like that. I think Kit created this. I think at that point George R. R. Martin's probably having a conversation with somebody saying, can I get in front of this? Would you like me to? It definitely is interesting.
Which leads us to his blog post that came out on June 23rd at 1:59 p.m. He didn't even wait till 2. He just got right to it. Put it out there. Now, there's a lot in this thing we're going to dig into, but I want to go to the end here. This is because at the top of the article, he praises James Hibberd as an actual journalist, which he is. He's the one who wrote the book Fire Cannot Kill Dragon. A Dragon. I highly recommend you all check that book out. It's great. So we can talk about that if we want a little bit of George heaping the praise on an actual journalist who protects his sources, finds sources, has sources, confirms, gets quotes, respects off the record stuff, everything. But then George at the end of this goes into a wonderful little diatribe at clickbait websites and even podcasts. George R. Martin's not listening to us here, but I understand where he's coming from. We are talking about news stories and digging in. Sure, and we're always going to do that. That's it's an industry, it's an ecosystem now. But George being upset at those clickbait websites that love spinning words out of control. Of course, no surprises there. Especially this idea of pitting House of the Dragon versus Rings of Power. George being such a fantasy fan, being a Tolkien fan, being a Lord of the Rings fan himself, he disputes that right away. Saying somehow 3/4 of the clickbait sites out there are ignoring the entire thrust of my comments, twisting my words on their head into headlines about how much I want to beat the Tolkien show. Sigh, he says. To clarify, I have a competitive nature. Sure. Goes into talk about his Jets or the Giants or the Mets. Also talk about awards he's won and more awards that he's lost. He's a fantasy fan. So yes, he wants Rings of Power to be great. And he wants it to run for many years, win Emmys and Golden Globes. He wants the same for House of the Dragon. He wants the same for Dying Earth. He wants the same for Nine Princes and Amber, as it's hopefully going to be faithfully adapted. He goes into all that stuff there. So yeah, we here at Casterly Talk never want to be part of that clickbait kind of thing, even though you do have to get people on the show. I just really liked his comments, both about Hibbert and here. Before we even dive into taking his word, we're going to try to stick to the words and then have fun speculating, not twisting the words here. Thoughts on all this here from the man himself?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought, real quick, for those of you listening, there's a thunderstorm happening here in I guess the Florida would be Dorne. I don't know.
Yes.
So Bulldog not happy about that, but anyway, there it is right now. But yeah, I think that first thing I noticed about George in this, talking about both victories and failures, is I like that George addresses his own fallibility throughout this, talks about the amount of things that haven't gone to series, talks about things he hasn't won. In his sports fandom, that's an inherent part of it, is there is no in between. It is wins and losses. And so I do like that he led with that sort of stuff. And I think that he's smart enough to understand the ecosystem that you're discussing and how this has become a job and how entertainment reporting is. That's why he gives Hibbert his credit, but he's making a distinction that's based in professionalism, that's based in respect. You and I both have very strong feelings about like undermining story and undermining artists, and the leaking of information and the spinning of it are both forms of that. So when he says something about Aragorn's tax policies, as he famously did, like, that's fun. But to say that it's a shot at J.R.R. Tolkien or at the Tolkien estate or anything like that, which I'm not saying anyone has, but extrapolating in that way is such bad faith. And that's a fight that we are constantly having with the space that we're a part of. And so for him to be on his level, to be someone of his stature addressing this directly on the record and the written word is great, because we've seen people like Jon Favreau, like, kind of in a cheeky way discuss it, or like have to say like, please put your phones away, please understand that this is a work in progress. And that's, sort of simple, it's on stage, whatever. But I love this attitude, and I would love to see more of it, whether it's from him or James Mangold shutting people down and saying, let me make my movie on Twitter. Like, I think that there's a battle for the discussion of art happening. So
No, and look, at times it can be a fine line, and I have no problem going up to that line. A good rumor can inspire thoughts and speculations and just wants and desires as a fan, and I have no problem diving into those. We did last week with Jon Snow, which was nothing at the time more than a kind of a rumor-like report, and it is what it is. But yeah, there's some. Yeah, I'm not a giant fan of scoop culture either. I'm not completely against it as a profession per se, but it's just it's oddly, I don't know, it's been almost I don't want to say weaponized, but you know what I mean. It's just become a bigger thing than it ever used to be, that is used. I think that's where the weaponized part comes in my mind, where the scoops are used even against the properties as they're being created. They're used against the creators, or they're used to establish expectations that the creators aren't even trying to reach, because they're trying to tell their own story. I think that's where I have the issue with it here. Not speculation, not the fun. And because we're going to do it here, and we have to own up to that too. Last week was a rumor of a rumor, a highly substantiated, because it comes from James Hibbert. And that is actually one of the things I'm glad George mentioned, because when it comes from a Hollywood Reporter or a Variety or a StarWars.com finally confirms it, that's when it becomes more than just a scoop. It becomes something that we can discuss because there's a possibility of it all really happening.
Yeah, and you're in conversation with the work and you're in conversation with the creators when you take it on their terms. I mean, I remember way back in middle school, that was the first time a major leak ever happened, at least in my lifetime or in my conscious lifetime. I know that there were Phantom Menace leaks and stuff, but I wasn't on the internet at the time. When X-Men Origins Wolverine, the work print leaked and there were no special effects finished, and me and all my friends watched it. We were kids, so it's like nothing malicious, but that wasn't fair. Still don't like the movie, but it should have been. I should have been able to dislike it on its completed terms, and I think that that's a conversation with the art. To what you said, like coming up against the line and talking about rumors. Rumors are fun. You and I will text each other. Our other friends will text us. That's in the spirit of on the playground with your friends and saying like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if such and such did this? Or I had thoughts. Game of Thrones ends. I'm watching John right away, and I'm looking at my friends and saying, what do you think he did? Like so that part of your brain touches the rumors, and I understand why it's exciting, but it's the monetization. And when he says clickbait, that's a cottage industry. That is money. And you are monetizing stuff that you don't have a right to. It's not literal theft, but we're getting to the point where I mean, IP theft is a thing, so I guess it is literal theft, but we're getting to the point where it's like ideological petty theft, where at that point it's like, do you even have the right to discuss my thing? You wouldn't kick down the door to a painter studio and say, ha ha, half of that's blank. Like, what? It's a painting.
Yeah, and look, we'll get to the fun stuff here. Yeah, so my final thought on it is, if you're in that line of work, I get it. Yeah, it's not even them half the time that are making it more of a problem. It's what we do with the information. So we always want to be careful with what we do with the information here. And George R. R. Martin does too, which is why, after praising James Hibbert as an actual reporter and saying later on, look, I spoke to him, but didn't confirm anything. So hey, this leaked. He says this, and I want to try to read as much as he says here, Alden, if you don't mind, because it's George's words and we want to deal with what his actual words are. He writes, so yes, there is a Jon Snow show in development. The Hollywood Reporter story was largely correct, and I would expect no less from James Hibbert. I've dealt with a lot of reporters over the past few years, and Hibbert is one of the very best, an actual journalist who does all the things journalists are supposed to do, getting the facts right, talking to sources, respecting requests for background only and off the record, etc., that most of the clickbait sites never bother with. Our working title for the show is Snow. Again, just a working title, I'll add. There are 4 live-action successor shows in development at HBO. Word got out of about 3 of them some time ago, which we've been dealing with these, rumors and ideas and stories hanging over us. 10,000 Ships, he goes on to add. The Nymeria show, helmed by Amanda Siegel. Sea Snake, aka 9 Voyages with Bruno Heller. And the Duncan Egg show, The Hedge Knight, or Night of the Seven Kingdoms with Steve Conrad writing. I think some of these were officially announced. In other cases, news leaked out. And he adds in parentheses, these things always seem to leak. There are so many people involved, writers, producers, agents, and everyone has assistants. And there's always the guy who runs the Xerox machine, and reporters have sources, and people gossip. So Snow has been in development almost as long as the other 3. And I think, Alden, I'll stop. We're going to come back to that. That's kind of just exciting in its own way. And he adds, but for whatever reason, it was never announced and never leaked until now. But yes, it is true. This was not an official announcement from HBO, so it seems there was another leak. I did a long interview with James Hibbert last week for the big House of the Dragon story that Hollywood Reporter is planning. Ooh, can't wait for that. And at the end of the call, he asked a few questions about the spinoffs. Is it possible one of the spinoffs is a sequel rather than a prequel, he asked. I answered, no comment. Then he asked, is it possible a member of the original cast is attached? And again, I answered, no comment. And that was all. But plainly, he found someone more forthcoming than me. Who? I don't know, and I suspect I never will. A good journalist protects his sources. I love that from George. Like, it's the game. Not much more I can tell you, not until HBO gives me a green light. And then this fun part. It seems as though Emilia Clarke has already mentioned that Snow was Kit's idea in a recent interview. So that part is out. Yes. It was Kit Harington who brought the idea to us. I cannot tell you the names of the writers, showrunners, since that has not been cleared for release yet. But Kit brought them into his own team, and they were terrific. He goes and talks about some various rumors, but he adds, but this is about the Hedge Knight, Sea Snake, and all the animated shows. It says Kit's team have visited me here in Santa Fe. Ooh, that famous Santa Fe visit to George. I love those stories. Kit's team has visited me here in Santa Fe, worked with me and my own team of brilliant, talented writer consultants to hammer out the show. So it goes on to talk about it's still in script phase. Outline and treatments have been written and approved. Scripts have been written. Notes have been given. Second and third drafts have been written. So far, that's all. This is the way television works. Please note, nothing has been greenlit yet, and there's no guarantee when or if it will be on any of these shows. The likelihood of all 4 series get on air, well, I'd love it, but that's not the way it works usually. So there you go. Then he goes on to some of the other stuff that might be there. So Alden, that's a lot. And you were the one, I had not seen this blog post yet. And you texted me and said, oh, this is juicy. This is juicy. So I kick it back to you. When you first read this, what are the things that jumped out to you first? What do you want to talk
about? First of all, the whole spirit with James Hibberd and George of like real recognizes real, where like he doesn't seem bothered by the fact that James tried to get it out of him. He thinks, I think he finds that humorous and he respects the game, like you said, and he understands it. So at that level, I found enjoyment in it. I found enjoyment of him acknowledging Emilia because I didn't know about that yet. So that's funny because you know that there's a friendship there, or at the very least a long-standing relationship. So there's a lot of like band get back together spirit in here, knowing that Kit was in, like, just seeing all these names like George R. R. Martin, Kit, Emilia Clarke, all these people talking. It gave me sort of those warm fuzzies, a nostalgia for a thing that isn't even that old. And on the book perspective, nostalgia for a thing that's not over. And so you move it over then into the present day movement of Kit's been to the house with his team, which is like Hollywood speak for probably manager, agent, etc. But he says that he brought these writers and showrunners into his team. So Kit's bringing the creative force with him, saying, and I know who I'd like to do this, presumably, not to put words in his mouth. That's exciting. But the amount of development time that they've had, we've been working on this the whole time, is very interesting. Because last week we talked about, well, what does Jon Snow in development even mean? Does that mean that we went to the art department and said, could you kick some stuff around, blue sky, see what that feels like? Or is it this? And it's this. Now, I know the working title is Snow. George, I know you like Casterly Talk. You have a secret account. I will propose, we said, is this going to be the Book of Jon Snow, like Book of Boba Fett? Book of Boba Fett has really nice alliteration. So I propose the Scroll of Snow.
The Scroll of Snow. Someone like me who has a slight impediment of some sort going on, that's going to be tough for me, but I'm game. The
Scroll of Snow. That's what I'm calling it in my mind until they hit me with a much better title. And my only last thought on that, we don't want to speculate, I think, too much about showrunners, writers, because that's like there's a million of them, and it's like who knows where it could go. But just looking at Kit's filmography, people that he might have really jived with, Chloe Zhao, director of Eternals. He's a key character in that. She's so naturalistic, so based in sweeping stories, natural light, getting out into nature, not green screening or anything. You bring those writers in. That's Chloe Zhao herself, Patrick Burleigh, Ryan and Kaz Furpo. Again, this is pure speculation just based off of a recent collaboration, but that's the only name that I've come up with in my mind where I'm like, gives me the tingles. But
no, I get you. And I'm looking up too. This is it's fascinating because based on the conversation last week, which was we had just so little bit of information to go on, which again is fun. That's why we're here to speculate. But there was a little bit of that, like, this just happened last week type of vibe, which even then we probably knew that wasn't the case. But like, hey, this month, this year, something about that. Like, hey, since this ended, I've had time to think about it. But this clearly indicates that Kid, who I do believe, I remembered he, like a lot of actors who reach a certain level of success, form a production company, take charge of their own stories and their own career to an even higher level. He was behind the show Gunpowder, right? That was something that came from
Yeah.
company there too. So we can look that up a little bit more and get more information on who he might have worked with there, and kind of any clues we can read the tea leaves there. But I don't know, it just made me giddy to know that, oh, this wasn't like, damn it, a lot of people I know don't love the Eternals, and man, the kids having cold feet of this post GOT world and these projects, and it's a comment on his career. There's a lot of cynicism, some just jokes, and sure, every once in a while you might want to go for a joke. I can respect that as a comedian, I guess, but I just like that this was in his brain as he's living, breathing, dying with the character of what's next, and that's exciting to me. I don't know why that makes me just giddy like a schoolboy, as they'd say in Indiana Jones. But it's my favorite part of the story is that this was already here, that this has been in development for a bit.
Yeah, my favorite part as well, mixed with the fact that, you talked about actors that get to that certain stature, and I think we mentioned it last week too. That is a growing thing. Scarlett Johansson becomes a Black Widow producer. Hemsworth produced Love and Thunder. Both Diego Luna and Ewan McGregor are producers on their Star Wars shows. But the key difference between all four of those and this is that none of them pitched those. They became executives in the process, in the negotiation process. They call you in and say, will you do Obi-Wan Kenobi again? And then in that growth development, he becomes executive producer. For an actor to say, here's my team and this is my idea, is so unique, especially on this franchise level. So it's like, wow, like, is Kit gonna, and this is all speculation, but is Kit gonna break in his directing shoes, and is he gonna actually, are we gonna have George R.R. Martin and Jon Snow sitting together writing a Jon Snow script? Like, it's very interesting to think about the world that we're in, and I'm happy for him because, like I said on the last episode, he seemed so emotionally affected by that ending, and screw it. Like, some people's solution is to get away from it, and some people's solution is to have a healthy relationship with it, sort of like the Harry Potter cast does. But if he's like, I want to do this, then I'm all for that. No cynicism required.
No, none needed here too. And I hope to God that one day maybe Clarke goes, by the way, me and my people have gone to Lucasfilm, and Kira the series is happening. I would love that as well, thinking of just that kind of stuff. There's a real ownership, as is often the case with actors who embody these roles, own these roles in a way. They don't own them people think Hamill owns Luke Skywalker. Even he'll tell you, they just rent me for the role, and I rent the role during that time. But you know what I mean? This is something he lived with, affected his life, caused him to grow. We see all the young actors on that show, and I think generally, even some of the comments that Macy's had lately about what Arya did to her, both good and bad, what her thoughts on the character. None of that I took as negative or negative to the experience, just something that she did while she was very young, grew up with, and has moved on to other things for right now. And again, I absolutely hope you could involve her sailing the high seas at some point in this show or her own. That day could come, but it just seems like Kit was in a different spot, and why wouldn't you wonder? And if you have any kind of ability to help tell that story, I'm glad he's there. It's exciting.
And also, from his perspective as an actor, if he has this inkling, you got to wonder if he looks at all of the legacy sequels, as they're often called, whether that's Top Gun Maverick or Ghostbusters Afterlife, the sequel trilogy, what have you. And he sees all of these fantastic actors, from Harrison to Bill Murray, whoever, and sees them gray-haired and old, and says, why do I have to wait for that? Like, maybe that's part of it too. Like, why do I have to be a nostalgia act if I can do it now? Which is not to reduce any of those guys to nostalgia acts, but
no, but it different. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's something about Harrison coming back to a lot of his roles, right? Including the big ones, and Indiana Jones 4 was part of that, and some would argue that didn't necessarily work out, but he seemed to enter a different phase of his career, especially around the time of Force Awakens, and if you don't have to wait, let's not wait. It's a little bit of a different kind of Hollywood too, with the ability to put a lot of content in a lot of different places. It would have been harder. It would have been possible, but it would have been harder in 88 Harrison to go, hey, George, I got an idea. Maybe Han goes on. Like,
Yeah.
George could have, if he wanted to do it, he could have done it. But you know what I mean? Like, if Harrison had said it's Solo a Star Wars story, but with me, it's a different system in a way now because of the streaming wars and the content place, and HBO Max needed it. And I don't say that from a cynical point of view either. It is business. It is money. We're talking about the iconography, as you always say, that the Game of Thrones has. Let's use it to get a new show going. Yeah, absolutely. This works on a business level, I'm sure, but on a creative level, I think it works a little differently too, having Kit on board for years.
Yeah, we're fighting a streaming war from their perspective. Like, that's what we're doing. We are trying to kill the competition in certain ways. And George is not, as he says here, he's not interested in like fighting the Tolkien show.
Yeah.
But from that executive perspective, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I have this conversation a lot with people when they say, why do we get 100 Mandalorian action figures, but I can't get a Ben Solo action figure from Rise of Skywalker? And I've said, well, because the Mandalorian characters are behind a paywall. Yeah. And the more that they can get that in the brain of the public, I think that there's definitely something to that. Of, oh, you like this toy? Your son's buying this action figure? Well, for $8, you can check out what that's from. So I would not be surprised if we see something similar here with House of the Dragon, Snow down the line, 10,000 ships, whatever, where they start to really, like, they're all HBO Max. They're not HBO proper, and we're going to market the hell out of them. And maybe you will see less original GOT going forward, because that's the nature of where we are right now.
Yeah, and it's a whole lot easier just to paint over Mando armor to sell figures.
That is true. Why can't I have Dinosaur Guy, but we get that random Forlom ripoff? That's why.
Yeah, you'll always have new clone troopers to buy because you just paint them over. The other angle of this isn't necessarily directly addressed, but overall it is, because George is like, yeah, not only am I aware, I've heard about it, they've talked to me, my team's been involved. That was one of the big questions we had last week, of just the idea of taking the story forward and taking the Game of Thrones world story, not the Song of Ice and Fire world forward. It begged the question that we asked several times over last week of, well, where's George R.R. Martin in all of this? It's a story he hasn't even finished yet, and you're telling him to go forward. Not that he couldn't think of both sides of the story at the same time, of course, but that was the big question. And now to hear that, yeah, not only am I aware, we've had meetings over chips and salsa in Santa Fe, which, by the way, I don't say that as a fact. I just have a vision of George and a bunch of writers and creators and Kit sitting at a Mexican restaurant in Santa Fe having chips and salsa. That's how I take my meetings, Alden. So I got to assume that's how George does too, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think George is an appetizer sampler type guy. Because I think that fits his personality of like, I want some of this. Nah, I want some of this. Like, I think that he definitely is that entity. Yeah, it's super interesting because it's like around that splinter point that people love to fixate on. He stopped being as involved. It's like, yeah. And he said, I think at one of the San Diego Comic Cons, like, I consider it to be an alternate universe. That's great. But it did seem like he was going to focus on the book one. He gave those ambiguous bullet point notes to Benioff and Weiss. Yeah. We'll never know what those are, probably, until some NDAs break. So it just felt like that the Benioff and Weiss take was over outside of House of the Dragon. But now, not so much. And you got to wonder if maybe crafting Winds of Winter and Dream of Spring made him feel more inspired to revisit. Maybe it was Kit's pitch, and maybe he's reverse engineering. Like, if Kit says, I think this, and then George can say, well, actually, we can take that from what you said and that from what you said, but check out this from Winds of Winter. Like, it's conversations that I am fascinated by.
Yeah, and this is not spinning his words out of control and context. This is no words yet. So maybe he'll write a blog post next. I was listening to Casterly Talk, and they said no. No, I'm fascinated by what could be a give and take creatively, or just sculpting and crafting the story going forward, and George being open to it. Not in the sense that I think anything Kit might pitch would change Winds of Winter, and I'm not suggesting that you said that directly, but just like he's our, like we've talked about before. Yeah, I hear Aidan Gillen's voice when I write Baelish. I love the portrayal of Shay, perhaps more than I even did in the books. They took Robb Stark, not a VO, a point of view character, and turned it into something else. Like that stuff's on the record, and so as much as we want to maybe have fun with the tension that we think that might have been there between George and Dan and Dave, it's never been directly stated, to be clear, even though we've even had those kind of speculative conversations here. So all that to say, the fact that he is sitting down and listening to Kit, and I like your idea. I would love for him to write this on a blog of, I take pitches all the time about Game of Thrones. Kit came in and it worked for me in a way that I hadn't thought about, or in the way that none of us had thought about. Going forward wasn't necessarily on the table, and he came in and helped push us forward. That would be fascinating. Again, we don't know. We're speculating.
He has such an instinct of like, I have to flush everything out, for better and for worse. Some people accuse that of being why he slows down on writing. We'll never really know. That's his business. I'm not going to presume that. But when you look at the way that he functions with expanding his mythology, he has an idea, and then it's like, oops, I wrote a textbook. Oops, I wrote a history. If it goes to him, and again, this is complete just a vision in my mind. If Kit said to him, yeah, and then I was thinking Jon Snow would find a group of giants, then George will jump in and say, actually, 1-1 was the last giant, and this and this. Once you say something that makes George go, well, actually, about his own world, it's slippery slope. Whatever that is, whatever Kit said that made his mind race, we know how this man works. He's gonna want to like that. The creators don't stop. They don't stop creating. That's why I love stories like George Lucas being on the Mandalorian set and naming Axe Woves. He just randomly named a Mandalorian because it just came to him, and like, why wouldn't you? Or George during the pre-Disney days sending a memo to the company saying no more Wookiee Jedi. And then it's like things like that it's like, you're not actively creating anymore, but you still are.
You still are. Yeah, you still are. That's great. No, wonderful stuff. Final thoughts on it here. We don't want to discuss some other things before we get out of today. And this is the fun, big stuff here. This now we talked last week of what would affect Jon Snow north of the Wall. What would plot? What as fans do we dream of? What do we think of? We don't want to create false expectations that we want to be, that we're over, just are beholden to. I still love this idea we were talking last week, Alden, of just like, the Drogon's located, and there's one person in this world to go find Drogon and see what happened and see what he did with Daenerys. There's something intriguing to me that might be where the story, in my mind, where I'd want it to go. Again, it's what I want. I'm not sure what the story will do. And then to hear him like, I told Emilia, to have her kind of confirm that. That doesn't, I'm not suggesting at all that confirms, because again, she denied it, and you have to go ahead and take her words at face value, just like we took Liam Neeson's words that he was never going to appear on the Star Wars TV show, despite being in Clone Wars before and Rebels, right? Rebels, definitely Clone Wars. I can't remember.
Clone Wars, not Rebels. No. Well, unless it was I think he's like archival audio in Rebels, but
so I take her laughing denial as the truth until it's not. But hey, it just got my mind spinning of him texting her at some point and going, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this?
Oh, yeah.
And there's more to tell.
There's a group chat called Potential Dream Sequences, ? Him, her, Richard Madden, let's get them all in there. Him and Richard just having worked together on Eternals. It's like, is he, I'm not saying Robb Stark will be involved, but it's the kind of thing of this guy, again, Jon Snow, like I said in our last conversation, he's unlike a lot of the heroes in the Song of Ice and Fire, because he's mythically tied to the world, where a lot of these guys are just men. Jon has been resurrected. He's like Beric Dondarrion, Jon, Daenerys. There's that group of people that have a foot into the magic of it too. Even though he's not like an active magic user, it's still an interesting thing where this is his second life. So how much of the lingering shadow of the first life is going to be hanging over it?
Love that. Maybe that's the second working title, The Lingering Shadow of Snow. All the final thoughts on this big follow-up to last week's story. Thanks again to George R.R. Martin for blogging. He's become the #1 source for Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon spin-off news, just like Jon Favreau's Instagram was the #1 source for Mandalorian stories at one point, and Ron Howard's for Solo. Final thoughts, Alden.
Yeah, my final thought is that I wouldn't have it any other way than that. I'm so happy that he got out in front of it less than 7 days later,
Yeah.
or maybe exactly 7 days later. It was just, I can't imagine the joy it going on inside of that team, because it does come from this guy that he's known since he was a kid. Like Kit was in his early 20s,
Right.
and so it's a different time. Kit being older and more of an established pro. I'm excited for everybody involved. This has shot to the top of my most anticipated, and it's like sometimes I feel like, am I the fan that people talk about, where it's like, we just gave you something you knew and you ate it up, and it's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I own that.
Yeah.
I'm excited for 10,000 ships. I'm excited for
Oh, yeah.
Yee. I'm excited for all
Yeah.
that,
Golden Empire. Yeah.
but
Yeah. Absolutely.
this is it though.
But yeah, yeah, it is as they. My final thought too is looking at as they expand HBO expands this world, because again, as I keep saying here, why not? You look around the landscape and go, we've got something pretty powerful. With rich lore and its own world and history. Let's expand. So it's great, and we got a lot of going in the past. We got a lot of new things. We got a lot of different worlds we've never explored. So as we say in Force Center, that Star Wars buffet. Why not have in the corner the classic chicken wings you all love? Snow. Let's play around with this world while we also explore things we've never really explored before in this world. I think you can, dare I suggest, Alden, have it all.
What's one classic chicken wing against a kingdom? Everything.
That's my point exactly.
Everything.
We are going to discuss a little bit of Rings of Power news. We will be covering that show here, of course, on Casterly Talk. Before we do that, though, we're going to have a little fun call. We're going to send the Ravens. This is a message from our good friend, Eric Monroe.
Hey, Ken Casterly Talk. So, new House of the Dragon official merchandise is out on the HBO shop. Merchandise, a very big part of Game of Thrones. I love all the shirts. I own a lot. My favorite, of course, being the Stannis Baratheon Flaming Heart shirt. To be perfectly honest, I own two of them just in case something happens to my main one. I got the backup, so I don't have to freak out. So I took a look, and there's a lot of good ones. So my question is, which have caught your eye?
Well, that's a big question and a great one from Eric Monroe. And, as a fellow Stannis Baratheon fan, I respect Eric having two of those Flaming Heart Stannis shirts. I only have one, and Alden, it's starting to fade, and I just don't know what I'm going to do. I have to track one down.
You're good. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
There we go. We were doing some mute dance there.
Mute dance. I cut off your mic because I just didn't want you to talk bad about my Stannis shirt.
No, that's what it was. You didn't want to hear my immediate takes about. See, I struggle though, because like, am I a Stannis diehard? No, but I am a Melisandre diehard. So it's like I'm on that team anyway. It's interesting because we're almost in that era where that stuff is becoming old, especially those earlier season characters. Like I have a Robb Stark Funko Pop, and I'm like, can we update him, please? Can we get a new mold? Like,
I have Game of Thrones t-shirts that are now 10 years old. Like,
gross.
And it's a weird thing. All right,
disgusting.
So Eric's question, I did bring up the official shop, which is interesting to note that it's now the official WB shop, not just the HBO shop. And look, there's some great Funko Pops, a lot of good stuff, a lot of shirts. We got the new poster on a shirt. We got the Dreams Didn't Make Us Kings, Dragons Did catchphrase on almost everything. And there's a lot to look at. Alden, where does your eye go to? Merch is important. You got to represent this to the world. Are you ready to represent House of the Dragon to the world?
I am, and I told you off air when we were kind of looking at some of these that I don't like to be like logos guy. I say, well, I have a logo on my beanie, but beanies are a little bit different.
I'm not a logo guy.
But I like stuff that is more just like either an iconography thing from the show, like a symbol, like a simple black t-shirt with a hand of the king, the pin on it. Yes. Love that type of stuff. So I love this black shirt that's called the Dragon Crest. It's like that silver with, you could see the 3 rubies in there. I'm not sure if that's a specific family member's crest, or if it's maybe that's the Viserys era Kingsguard. Not quite sure, but I'm sure we'll see in the show. So I like that a lot. And then the other thing, this is not House of the Dragon, but I just love the simple black baseball cap that says "Not Today."
Yeah, that was almost an add to cart. I need to get myself a Game of Thrones beanie here because I wear the old bald man beanie now most of the time. So yeah, I got to do that. And I'm with you. My taste in merch has changed over the years, both in Star Wars and Game of Thrones. I have a lot of my Game of Thrones shirts still, simply because I was on a lot of shows where the requirement was wear a shirt and put 59 toys on the table. Which was always fun, but it's something I don't really do anymore. So I haven't bought any new Game of Thrones merch in a while. My Star Wars merch is now what I describe as muted. It's even things like you have on now. You have Nathan Hamill's Drogs shirt on. Something I have the same shirt and same pins and everything. It's just kind of unique. It's creative and a different kind of expressing the love of Star Wars in a different way, I should say. So I'm at that spot in Game of Thrones. So I have to. This was weird. This was a great question from Eric, because there would be a time where I'd be like, "What do I add to cart?" And I'm looking at this. I'm like, I don't know. One of the things I want to wait for is the show itself to show up, and the characters and the plots and the themes to emerge that I will love. Not that I don't want to just go in and say I'm supporting the show from the start, or I want to wait to see if it's good or not. But you know what I mean? Where you said not today. That's something that, yeah, maybe if you had been completely steeped in the books before the show came out, you would have been ready for that. But as a show first viewer, as I was back then, that not today is that got me, that moved me, that pulled me in, and that emerged as something later in the show that I connected with. So I want to wait for this show to hit, drop, land on the shores, and then I want to find out what's in it that I love, that I now want to represent to the public.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's about finding the corners of the actual product that you're watching and saying, "Oh, this is what I latch onto." This, like, I always liked Brienne, but I didn't pick up a piece of Brienne merchandise until she was knighted in those final episodes, because that was the moment where I was like, "Oh, it's complete," and I love her more than I've ever loved her now. So I got that shirt that says "Sir Brienne of Tarth, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms," just to celebrate that scene. So I will see what we latch on to there. I mean, it's like buying action figures for any franchise. It's like buying anything. There's going to be characters where, like, there's going to be inevitably a character that frustrates the hell out of me. I'm not going to buy their merch. But even if they're supposed to frustrate the hell out of me, and I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
But somebody like Damon, who I've been so excited for, somebody like the Sea Snake, someone like Otto, those are all these seasoned guys that I think are going to be super compelling in the same way that Ned and Robert were. And so we'll see, but we'll see. I could be surprised, and my favorite character could be somebody that I haven't invested in at all so far.
Yeah.
So
wait for the story to pull you in. But it was a great question by Eric, because it's another great run of merch rolling out in front of us, and that is be a part of the fun around here. Before we get out of here, we're going to have a quick talk about Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Of course, that show will debut about a week and a half, 2 weeks after House of the Dragon, and we'll be talking about it here. This is interesting stuff, man. I'm going to run through some pictures here if you're watching on YouTube, but if you're listening on the podcast, still my preferred form of communication, all that. We got new orcs. We got a lot of gruesome looking, realistic looking orcs. These will be, of course, the ones featured in the show. And there's some great articles out there, including one from Variety that talked to Lindsay Weber. And who was the other name? I've just scrolled past it. It is help me,
Jamie. I had it too. Like you said off air, bold the names. Jamie Wilson.
Jamie Wilson. There, yeah. I only saw Wilson added. I'm like, yeah, give me the first name. This is a note to Ken. Make more notes before the show. Don't just. I found this article about 2 minutes before I pressed record with this on, and some great stuff in there. But there were some things I was reading here. We'll talk about these, for lack of a better term, being more practical orcs, because during the Hobbit trilogy, infamously, Alden, Peter Jackson was having a lot of fun with technology, and a lot of the orcs were more than meets the eye, so to speak, and that never sat well with a lot of folks, and it was not my favorite aspect of the Hobbit films, though I've come to appreciate that trilogy a little bit more than I did at the time that they were out, to be clear. But this is the first big thing here in this show that is in that world, but not in that world, legally can't cover some of the things that fun kind of rights and estate issues surrounding anything with Lord of the Rings. But this, I'll just say, I loved what I saw here. I love the look. I love going back to And it's always dangerous to say going back to, but using a little bit more, or at least leading first with practical orcs here. So general thoughts as we dive into this a little bit more.
Yeah, all I hear is the Force Awakens sizzle reel in my mind. Real sets, practical effects. And like that became sort of a meme, but I admire the spirit. And to be clear, I love Peter Jackson. I love what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
I saw The Hobbit, Unexpected Journey in an IMAX theater in 3D in 48 frames per second. I went the whole 9 because I wanted to support that experiment. I got a headache, and it was very unpleasant for the eye, but you can't know that until you try. So I respected the spirit, and also on a real world level, I would like to just, as Peter Jackson's lawyer, I would like to say that he gets more heat for that than he should, because there was also the real world element of I have to work quick to undo some of Guillermo del Toro's orcs, which we know that like you can see the bulge, the original bulge that Guillermo had with like some red like hair, and it's Del Toro. Like it was way more fantastical and weird. Peter comes in and then it's like fix them computer. Like, so I understand that too. Now this with an amount of time to create legally protected orcs that are different enough. I think that these look great. They could easily blend into anyone's experience with either of the Jackson trilogies. And I'm excited to see this I think we're going to make a resurgence right now. I just shared on Twitter somebody named Barry Howie, who did the makeup for Stranger Things, The Green Knight, and all these other projects. We're in a generation that is really, really embracing that now. It's a lost art form, and I'm glad that it's still going.
Yeah, Wilson does say we did decide from the outset that we would try to make this a very real show. So therefore, we try to use real prosthetics and everything and minimize the visual effects, because there are hundreds of productions that are heavy on visual effects, and you can see it. And that the human eye is getting better and better, and knows what is real and knows what isn't, because we're just so getting deloused with all this product that you begin to know. Sorry, I stumbled over some of that there, but I'm laughing too when you mentioned the Force Awakens thing. Of there was a little bit of, hey, for those who had little issue with some of the prequel stuff in terms of how it looked, don't worry, it's all real here, which was it was not a lie.
True enough, from a certain point of
view, where Phantom Menace had more practical stuff than anyone would have imagined. But I get it. And again, it even goes to our conversation about marketing House of the Dragon in a post Game of Thrones world. How much do you want to go? It's that thing you love, but it is different. I understand it. But I love what they're doing here. I love what they're saying about the practical nature of it. Makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think that if you're going to, prequelize this as much as you can from a legal standpoint, getting closer and closer is interesting. I mean, The Hobbit is only 60 years prior to Fellowship, so there's not going to be that big of a departure. These look like there is an evolution that has happened. I think that Peter's orcs in Fellowship and the subsequent films are maybe a little bit more monstrous, but it was also a darker time of resurgence. Like that fit the themes of like really bastardizing them and what Saruman was doing, and the crossbreeding of the Uruk-hai and all that stuff. So this to me fits a fantastical nature. Like I'm excited to see this new young Galadriel fighting these guys on a very simple level.
Yeah, and one of the things, this is Lindsay Weber saying that this is the design. Everyone who designs them, they have a real passion for them. They love practical prosthetics and design, and they felt that they needed exploration, given that this is the second age and thousands of years before the events of the third age. It was really important to treat them as their own culture and explore their world on its own two legs in its own right. The follow-up that, going back to that article and other articles, I was reading from an article on another website, but the end of the Variety one, Weber says, the Rings of Power is one of the big revelations. That the Rings of Power will get viewers will get to see female orcs for the first time, saying there's some female orcs that I truly love. Not surprising, Alden. A lot of people out there on the old internet did not like that. There's a lot of Game of Thrones, but also a lot of Lord of the Rings fans who want to hide behind old traditions or what was or what Tolkien said and did and all those kinds of things, and quite frankly just don't want to move forward in this idea of exploring the orcs culture, which doesn't necessarily mean we're going to I don't know. It's not like an orc origin story of they were all just nice and misunderstood. But you saw this in Star Wars and the power of it with the Tusken Raiders and turning it into the Tuskens of the Dune Sea, getting more into the culture and treating it a little different, which only helps expand the story. And then you add this idea, the simple concept of female orcs and people already up in arms wanting to fight it. And Amazon is already having to deal with that. And it's predictable, and I think we're unfortunately used to it, but doesn't mean we don't want to address it or not fight it over here.
Yeah, interesting how real life orcs seem to have a lot of thoughts on fictional orcs. There's a lot of parallels there in how the orcs used to be normal elves, as Saruman explains in, I believe, in Two Towers, and then they were twisted and turned into what they are, into ravenous packs of creatures that go after things mindlessly. I think that there's something to dig into there too. And as to the Tolkien of it all, like, lest we forget that Tolkien was boots on the ground in the fight against fascism, and was there and took those experiences into his story. And it's a story about small folk and about togetherness and about, especially as Peter Jackson, Philippa Bowens, and Fran Walsh's screenplays fleshed out Gimli and Legolas, they emphasize like race relations and things like that, and how how Elrond, like, when they're trying to look for allies, Elrond's like, who will you turn to? The dwarves? Like, there's prejudice hanging all over some of these relationships, and the story refutes those things. And so, as we always talk about, like, if you're going to really stand for these things and really understand them, then you have to, in good faith, understand them. Like, you can't approach this and not acknowledge what it is. You can't approach X-Men without the LGBTQ metaphor, the civil rights metaphor. Star Wars is very blatant and obvious. Star Trek is the most blatant and obvious. So it's at that point, and I said to you off air when we were talking about the story, like, a lot of people with misogyny, and that's what it is, a hatred of women and wanting to gatekeep them out of the spaces, they don't even do that consistently. Like, they say, like, oh, we just don't want forced diversity, but that's a dog whistle. It's not a real thing, and it has no criteria. Because if we really unpack what they're saying, you don't want women to be warriors. Well, how about monsters? No, not that either. Well, how about fair maidens? No, not that either. There's too many fair maidens. It's always going to be a moving goalpost, and it's lame. And they claim to be the experts, but it makes their argument holds no ground. Because even if you look, they claim to be defenders of the mythology, right?
Yeah,
we're pure fans.
It's a shield to hide behind.
Yeah, respect the lore. Okay, let's respect the lore. If the elves returned, where does it say that only the male elves returned?
Yeah,
that is just a bankrupt idea, a bankrupt stance.
No, well said, and I'm happy to address it here on the show. And I think on the day we're recording in America with the Supreme Court's decision, it's important to have these kind of discussions. It's something I don't want to run away here at Casterly Talk, and set the boundaries early on our discussions of Rings of Power of for anyone wanting to join our community. I'm excited to see what Rings of Power does, just in terms of its optics and how it looks and what it's going to explore, and also what it's just going to not explore, but just say, here it is. I just, because for me, this is my point of view and my words, but if there's a black elf, how dare they? I don't even need that explored. I just need that to be. Let's start there. If that is what it is. I don't need to justify it. I don't need to work. It just is. It goes back to the Force Awakens, before the movie comes out. The idea, the people hiding behind the mythology, hiding behind the lore, saying a black man can't be a stormtrooper. We absolutely just it's not done in this world. I'm not a racist. It's not done in this world. That is a shield you're trying to hide behind here, and you're seeing it more and more and more with Rings of Power, because the Rings of Power is making an effort. There's some great stuff in the Tolkien text, as we know. There's some great stuff you were saying, and he was in World War I, and that affected him greatly. But we know, you look at just look at the Fellowship of the Rings, it's kind of one shade of paint. In the cast, and for this show to have the audacity to try to make it look a little different and make it look a little bit more like our own world, I will stand behind that every day of the week. And the fact that I was talking with a friend of mine who's kind of dealing with this stuff right now and tracking this, this conversation. Man, it is so sadly predictable that this would be a talking point. The simple idea. You haven't even seen the story. They're exploring this culture. You don't even know what that means. You're just hearing the simple words. Oh, and there's some female orcs, and now you're up in arms. We reject that in full here at Casterly Talk.
Yeah, absolutely rejected emphatically. There's no place for it. It's not a matter of debate because, again, the forced diversity thing doesn't exist. I've experienced this coming up in the age that I came up in. Every fandom that I've ever had, we're on the verge of seeing Jane Foster Thor when that storyline came out. Like, ridiculous. How could she be Thor? It's like, well, how could you not have reading comprehension? She's check out the story, like engage with it in good faith. No one's forcing you to like anything. But, I also think that because Lord of the Rings, I think if you asked most people in the world, what do you think of when you think of Lord of the Rings? They would say the Jackson trilogy. That's held on such a pedestal as it should be. Academy Award winning, prestige drama, broke so much ground that the memory of the development of that has been sort of lost to time, which is sort of ironic because that's what Galadriel talks about as it opens, some things that have been forgotten and all that. Someone was posting, I think it was onering.net, was posting a lot of message board screenshots and stuff from the development of those films and how word got out that they added Arwen to the Battle of Helm's Deep, which, as we know, was eventually cut. But we know those scenes exist. You could see photos of them, and seeing just the horrible misogynistic backlash that was happening then against Liv Tyler. And then those scenes get cut. And I'm not saying they capitulated to those fans, just coincidence. But it's like because Lord of the Rings has always been considered like cordial and in-depth and we're the nicest fandom, like it hasn't had a microscope put to it, and then it's like we turned on the black light and we saw all the gunk, and it's like oh it's been a problem. And so everybody's having their reckoning. Everybody's having their, I mean, you have a certain news company a couple weeks ago that runs a piece on television in prime time that says Star Trek goes woke. Star Trek went woke. So this fight has been going on.
At best, media literacy is dead. At worst, it's at worst, it's just a horrible battlefront that society's we got to deal with now. And that's kind of where we at. I didn't want to hit it a little. Not even hit it hard. I just want to address it. It, talk about it, especially as we go forward. I'm excited to see what this show does. And does this guarantee an automatic win for the show in my heart if I don't like what they did or think? No, of course not. But that's something else that people might hide behind as well. We don't do that here.
I just have legitimate criticisms.
I can
tell.
Yeah, I don't like the character of Rose Tico, but that's not nice things to say about it. At that point, what you think of Rose Tico does not matter. What is happening to Kelly Marie Tran matters. That's the conversations we're going to have here. But here's the thing, Alden, it's not big business. So there's going to be less people watching us versus the other shows who are going to lead with how dare they add female orcs to this world. That is what will get the money, and that's just unfortunately the way it is. But we'll discuss the shows as we want.
Yeah, we could end up we'll accidentally do 2 more hours on why it's not big business to explore these ideas. But yeah, we're gonna do our best, and I'm excited for, again, like earlier today, I had a great conversation about Riva. You mentioned Rose. I'm excited for kids that love Frodo or Sam or Arwen, Eowyn to now have their Black Panther moment, to have their Shang-Chi moment. Star Trek, I mentioned Strange New Worlds earlier. Like, there was a fantastic new character played by a trans actress. So it's like, at that point, we have to revel in the victory too. And just sort of be excited. It's like I feel like I'm Bruce Banner. I'm always angry, but also sometimes I will go look. Like, I think reaction content is not for me, I will say. But I will sometimes I will purposefully seek out the ones of the groups being represented as a tonic to help.
Yeah, I get you. No, I get you. I get you. One of the lines that has absolutely inspired me, I'm going to be doing something on Force Center about it soon, is the exchange between little Leia and her adopted father, her father, Bail Organa, when she says, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make some changes. And he says to her as he smiles, then we'll make changes together. That's generational change. That's finding your place in change. It's all the things that's important to me. So we are absolutely excited to make these changes together with the creators and the storytellers between all these in all these shows. And for those who would fight it, you've already lost. It's here. So what can you do? But what can you do is celebrate these things, talk about it, dive in, and look at the news and have fun daydreaming about Kit, George R. Martin, and Chips and Salsa. Alden, we've done it. We've done it. We've come to the end of the show.
Yeah, I think we covered the gamut of the human experience here. Hunger, societal relations, we got it all. Business. I just have to say on air and apologize. Ken Napzok, yeah, tells me, oh yeah, Alden, let's go about 40 minutes. I fail every time.
I fail every time too. It's me. All right, we are out of here. Alden, tell them where they can find you and all your wonderful work. You do a lot of great things over in the Star Wars world and other things. Where can they find you and follow you?
Yeah, you can find me personally at that Alden Diaz, Twitter and Instagram, ThatAldenDiaz. Not the other Alden Diaz, that Alden Diaz. And then you can find Octo Radio, a Star Wars podcast, and our sister shows as well, all in one feed. And that's AHCHTO Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. The episode descriptions for those going forward are going to have links in regards to everything that happened with SCOTUS and the reversal of Roe. I'm pulling resources. If you go to the Octo Radio Instagram, we shared from Forward Midwifery, a company about midwifery and reproductive rights, a whole list of things, different needs, and then links for those needs. So you could check that out. There's other links too for things that we promote and stuff. So, we've had conversations off air. Like it's hard to sort of be like in the fantasy mood. Like I literally got into a major argument about SCOTUS with a family member and everything that like was a shouting match right before talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi today. So it's hard to separate those parts of your brain, but don't feel guilty for having fun and needing escapism.
It is all important. It's all part of the journey as well. Thank you for highlighting those links. Go to Alden's for more. For us here, you can follow the shows at M Drive Media. Morning Drive Media is where I put this on. So I don't have an actual Casterly Talk page. Maybe that'll change. We do have one on Facebook, but you just use the hashtag Casterly Talk if you want to join the conversation. We are on Anchor. If you want to get a call into the show, you can do that via the Anchor device. That's where our podcast is housed, I should say. And you can follow me at Ken Napzok. Go to my website, kennapzok.com. Everyone, we got to take care of each other, take care of ourselves, and find a way to fight and look towards the future. And part of that is talking about pop culture that is tremendously, tremendously powerful and insightful, and discusses in its stories and deals with the battles in the human condition that we are experiencing now and have always experienced and always will. So we'll look towards the light side to borrow an idea from another franchise. We'll see you next time here on Casterly Talk.